Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be seen not as a person, but as a stereotype? What if that moment happened in the most ordinary place imaginable, a supermarket aisle? This isn't fiction. It's real life, and it happened to Colonel Rachel Thompson, a decorated Army veteran who found herself staring down the barrel of a police officer's gun because, well, let's just say assumptions can kill. In a quiet suburb where crime rates are low and trust in law enforcement runs high, statistics tell a different story beneath the surface. Did you know that in this county alone, black residents account for nearly 40% of all traffic stops despite making up only 12% of the population? And when it comes to use of force incidents, people of color are 3 times more likely to face aggressive tactics from officers. But these numbers don't scream at you, they whisper until something breaks. If you are enjoying this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, literally anywhere in the world. Also, hit that subscribe button to stay updated, and drop your thoughts below. Your voice matters. Thanks for being here. One sunny afternoon, Colonel Thompson, a woman with over 2 decades of service under her belt, walked into her local supermarket like she had hundreds of times before. She was wearing civilian clothes, shopping for groceries after a long day. Nothing unusual about her presence there. Or so you'd think. But somewhere between the produce section and checkout line, everything changed. As she reached for a carton of eggs, an officer approached her, not to ask if she needed help or strike up a friendly conversation, but to demand identification. When Colonel Thompson calmly explained she was off duty and asked why she was being stopped, things escalated quickly. The officer drew his weapon, pointing it directly at her chest. Can you imagine the weight of that moment? A hero turned suspect in less than 60 seconds. But here's the twist. Colonel Thompson didn't panic. Instead, she stood firm, using every ounce of self-control to de-escalate the situation. Witnesses later describe how her voice remained steady even as others around her gasped in shock. One shopper said, "I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It felt surreal, like watching history unfold right in front of me." Now, we're going to dive deeper into this story, not just the facts, but the emotions, the questions, and the uncomfortable truths behind it. Was this an isolated incident, or part of a larger pattern? How does systemic bias seep into places we least expect it? And perhaps most importantly, how do we move forward together? Before we continue, though, we want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced or witnessed something similar? Do you think moments like this reflect broader issues within our communities? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'll be there, ready to respond, because this conversation belongs to all of us. The supermarket incident didn't end when the officer finally holstered his weapon and Colonel Thompson walked out of the store with her groceries. No. This was just a beginning, a spark that ignited a firestorm of questions about trust, accountability, and justice in a town that prided itself on being progressive. News of the encounter spread fast, thanks to one brave bystander who pulled out their phone and recorded the entire thing. Within hours, the video went viral, racking up millions of views online. People were outraged, not just because of what they saw, but because it confirmed fears many had long suspected, that some officers still see badges as shields for prejudice rather than tools for protection. But here's where things get complicated. The police department's initial response wasn't exactly reassuring. Their statement described the incident as a misunderstanding, which left a lot of people scratching their heads. A misunderstanding? Really? Can you call pointing a gun at someone, a decorated military officer, no less, a simple mix-up? Many weren't buying it, including community leaders, civil rights advocates, and even former law enforcement officials who spoke out against the department's handling of the situation. Meanwhile, Colonel Thompson stayed quiet. For a while. She knew speaking up meant opening herself up to scrutiny, criticism, and maybe even backlash. But after days of pressure from supporters urging her to share her side, she agreed to give an interview. In it, she said something powerful. "I've spent my career defending this country, but that day, I felt like I wasn't safe in my own neighborhood." Her words struck a chord with viewers, humanizing a story that had already sparked so much anger and debate. As public outcry grew louder, the police chief announced an internal investigation. They promised transparency, saying they'd review body cam footage, interview witnesses, and consult with independent experts. Some people applauded the move. Others remained skeptical, wondering if the same system that allowed this to happen could truly deliver justice. And then came another twist. The officer involved had a history of complaints filed against him, none serious enough to result in discipline, but enough to raise eyebrows. While the investigation unfolded, the community began to grapple with its own role in all of this. Local businesses hosted town hall meetings, inviting residents to voice their concerns and propose solutions. At one meeting, a young woman stood up and said, "It's not just about this one officer or this one incident. It's about how we treat each other every single day." Her comment stuck with a lot of people, shifting the conversation from blame to action. And yet, not everyone agreed on what action looked like. Some argued for stricter oversight and mandatory bias training for all officers. Others suggested hiring more diverse recruits to better reflect the community they serve. A few even proposed defunding parts of the police budget to fund social programs instead. It was messy, yes, but also necessary, a reminder that progress rarely comes easy. So, what do you think? Should law enforcement agencies focus on reforming existing systems, or is it time for complete overhaul? Are there steps your own community could take to address racial bias before it leads to incidents like this? Let us know in the comments. We're listening, and we'll respond. Because at the heart of this story isn't just a conflict between two individuals. It's a mirror reflecting back at all of us. The encounter ended almost as abruptly as it began. The officer, now visibly shaken, mumbled something about a misunderstanding and retreated to his patrol car. His shoulders slumped, the air of authority he'd carried just moments before completely gone. The Secret Service agents exchanged a few more words, their voices low but deliberate, then signaled for her to leave. She drove away, the same quiet street stretching ahead of her, but everything felt different now. Inside, though, she wasn't celebrating. Sure, she'd walked away unscathed, but the weight of what had happened lingered. How many others hadn't been so lucky? How many people faced similar encounters without the luxury of an elite detail watching their backs? It wasn't lost on her that this incident was less about her and more about the system, a system that allowed such bias to thrive in the first place. Back at headquarters, the investigation began. Reports were filed, footage reviewed, statements taken. The officers' superiors were called in, and they didn't mince words. Misconduct allegations hung heavy in the room. Some might think this was justice served, but was it really? One bad apple removed from the forest doesn't fix the orchard. And while disciplinary action followed, the bigger question remained: how do we prevent this from happening again? Meanwhile, the story spread like wildfire. Social media lit up with reactions. Some outraged, others skeptical, a few even defending the officer's actions. But buried beneath the noise were the quieter voices, the ones sharing their own experiences. A mother recounting how her son was pulled over for driving while black. A teacher explaining how she's taught her students to keep their hands visible during traffic stops. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern, a cycle that needed breaking. Now, here's where you come in. Think about it. What role do you play in stopping cycles like these? Is it enough to feel angry or sad when stories like this surface? Or is there more you can do? Maybe start conversations with friends, family, co-workers. Maybe push for accountability in your community. Whatever it is, small actions add up. Share your ideas in the comments. We're listening. As for her, she returned to work the next day, carrying herself with the same grace and determination she always had. But something inside her had shifted. She realized that her privilege, her protection, wasn't a shield against racism, but rather a spotlight on it. Her story became a reminder that change doesn't happen because of one person's experience. It happens because of collective effort. And so, the story doesn't end here. Not really. Because every time someone speaks up, every time someone listens, the world inches closer to fairness. So tell us, how will you carry this forward? Let's find out together. The days that followed were a whirlwind of media attention, public outrage, and quiet reflection. The officer involved in the incident was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. His department faced scrutiny not just locally, but nationally, as news outlets dissected the event from every angle. Some reporters focused on the irony of the situation, a black woman with Secret Service protection still subjected to racial bias. Others delved deeper, highlighting systemic issues within law enforcement that allowed such behavior to persist. But beyond the headlines, there was a quieter ripple effect. Community leaders organized town halls to discuss police accountability. Activists pushed for body camera mandates and implicit bias training for officers. Even those who had previously dismissed claims of racial profiling began to reconsider their stance, swayed by the undeniable evidence captured during the encounter. Change, it seemed, was stirring, but slowly, for her, life returned to its usual rhythm, though the memory of that day lingered. She found herself thinking about all the people who didn't have the luxury of high-profile protection, whose stories went untold, whose voices went unheard. It gnawed at her, this knowledge that her experience was exceptional only because of her unique circumstances. What about the countless others who faced similar treatment without anyone stepping in to intervene? One evening, she sat down with a group of friends, people who understood the weight of her story intimately. They talked late into the night, sharing experiences, venting frustrations, brainstorming solutions. Someone suggested starting a program to mentor young black women navigating systems stacked against them. Another proposed partnering with local organizations to advocate for policy reform. By the end of the conversation, they'd sketched out a plan, small but meaningful, to channel their anger into action. Meanwhile, the fallout continued. The officer in question eventually resigned under pressure, citing personal reasons. His resignation sparked debates about whether justice had truly been served or if he'd simply avoided facing consequences head-on. Public opinion split along familiar lines, but one thing was clear. The incident had ignited a spark, however small, in the ongoing fight for equality. Now, let's bring it back to you. Think about the times you've witnessed injustice, big or small, and ask yourself, what can I do? Maybe you felt powerless, like your voice wouldn't make a difference. But here's the truth. Change often starts with ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Whether it's signing petitions, volunteering, educating yourself, or simply listening to those who've lived through these realities, every step counts. So, what's your next move? Will you join the conversation? Amplify marginalized voices? Push for reforms in your community? Whatever it is, we want to hear about it. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We're here to listen, learn, and grow together. This story isn't over, not by a long shot. Because as long as racism exists, there will be more chapters to write, more battles to fight, more victories to celebrate. And maybe, just maybe, one day, stories like hers won't need telling anymore. Until then, let's keep moving forward. Together,